Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
This is Sarah Swan with the FPI Consortium. You're listening to the New Warehouse Podcast. I have a warehouse safety tip for you. My tip is to make sure you check your sprinkler system pressure gauges on the risers regularly. NFPA 25, the standard for the inspection, testing, and maintenance of water-based fire protection systems, requires these gauges to be verified quarterly to verify that your normal water supply pressure is being maintained. This is important because your water supply can change drastically through no fault of your own. If you've ever heard of the Super Bowl flush right at halftime for the Super Bowl, that's a great example. Everyone gets up to go flush and the municipal water supply drops drastically. If that happens at the same time you have a fire, you aren't going to have enough water coming to your water supply. If something were to happen, say a valve was closed on the underground main that you weren't aware of because they're doing work, you could suddenly have no pressure to your sprinkler system for a sustained period of time. So by checking these gauges regularly and comparing them to the water supply needed, which should be posted on the hydraulic placard on your riser, you have a better chance of making sure that your sprinklers are working in the event that you need them.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer. Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am going to be joined by Sarah Swan, and she is a senior code specialist with the FPI Consortium. The FPI Consortium helps companies with their safety and specifically their fire protection, and helps them to make sure that they are meeting codes and things of that nature. Actually, I got connected with Sarah recently on ProMat DX because she left a comment in one of the seminars asking about the fire safety of a solution. I forget exactly what the solution was, but I thought it was incredibly interesting and a very specific question. So I was like, oh wow, this lady must be interesting. I got to talk to her. So I seeked her out on LinkedIn, and now she's here. So Sarah, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Kevin. I'm doing pretty well. Getting, halfway through the week, so can't beat that.
Definitely, yeah, and I'm happy to have you on the show. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your senior code specialist? So tell us a little bit about your role as a senior code specialist, and what does that actually mean?
So I'm not a licensed fire protection engineer, though I do a lot of the same work as a fire protection engineer, and I work under are licensed fire protection engineers. I've been doing code compliance reviews and working very closely with all the NFPA codes and standards and building codes and things like that for over 10 years now. I spent 5 years in the nuclear industry, and I've spent over 5 years in this warehousing industry. Generally, I'll do just about anything that has to do with fire or life safety that you'll find in the IFC. So we review egress, do code compliance, advise owners of conditions that they have when we do a site survey that are adverse to fire and life safety, and make recommendations for how they can get better. Develop alternate means. So oxygen reduction is a great example of an alternate mean that's not in any of the building codes anywhere as an option for fire protection. If you want to use it, you need to petition the code officials, usually with some documentation that says this is why it's acceptable and why we should be allowed to do it. And that requires negotiations, documentation, meetings. Pretty much what I do is ensure that your construction meets the requirements for permitting and occupancy, and educate owners on the systems that they have installed so that they don't make the same mistakes the next time.
Interesting. And it's a good thing because a lot of times that can help prevent failures and delays in projects and things of that nature. So I'm curious, how did you get into this kind of role? I mean, did you grow up with like a burning desire for fire protection? And the pun was intentional there. So,
it's said quite often, a lot of people just fall into fire protection. There's, I think, only 2 or 3 universities in the entire United States that are ABET accredited for fire protection engineering.
Interesting.
So most people who get into this have mechanical engineering backgrounds or civil engineering backgrounds, and they fall into it. I was looking for a job out of college and got hired to do fire protection. I'm still doing it 11 years later.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say you just fall into it, because it's like very similar to the warehousing industry, I think, as well. Many people kind of just fall into that, myself included. It wasn't what I set out to do. And like you said, I got a job out of college that was involved with the logistics. And then, 10 years later, I'm still working in warehouses and doing a podcast about warehouses too. So I guess something happened or something clicked, right?
Yeah, that sounds like it.
Definitely. So you work for the FPI Consortium. So you told us a little bit about like your role there, but tell us a little bit about the FPI Consortium itself and what they actually do, and like what's the full suite, I guess, of your services.
So we're a full service professional fire protection and life safety consulting and engineering firm. The best way to describe it is we're there when you bring us in at the beginning of a project, middle of a project, or end of the project. What we're there to do is to make sure that any problems that come up, we either have managed to avoid them if we're brought in the beginning, or we've warned you about what those problems are going to be in case they do come up, so we can plan ahead for how we're going to address them. FPI was founded in 2001, and historically we've specialized in warehouse fire protection and life safety. We actually ran some fire tests on behalf of some clients a number of years ago now that got into the NFPA 13 standard as an alternate method of protecting paper records stored on catwalks. So we have a long history in doing warehouses, and the president of the company, his name's Jerry Schultz, who is a licensed engineer. He's actually on the 13 committee as an alternate for the Rack Manufacturers Institute. So we have a lot of experience with racking. We stay really abreast of what's going on with the industry and try to stay on top of things so that we can best advise our clients. And similar to what I do on a day-to-day basis, that's what the whole company does. That's what we do. We will do life safety analyses. We do egress analyses. We do design and analysis services for sprinkler systems or halon systems or fire alarm systems. You name the system, we probably can design it for you. Okay. We negotiate with code officials if there's something that they really don't want installed in the warehouse, say smoke and heat vents. We've negotiated with code officials, say, here's all the stuff we're doing. This is why we don't want to put one in. Have we presented an acceptable level of alternate methods to be able to not do that? And we also often witness the final inspections with the code officials. So if something comes up, we're there on behalf of the owner to say, oh, that thing, yeah, we'll get that fixed. We promise. Can we at least get a temporary C of O while we fix it?
Yeah.
So we can start operations. We're the owner's advocate is what it comes down to try and make sure that the warehouse is as safe as it can be, both from a property protection standpoint and a life safety standpoint.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it's really, really important too. I mean, especially, as people are building out warehouses and things of that nature, is that it's not always necessarily their expertise in doing all these things. And I've certainly heard of stories where companies have built out racking setups and all these things, and then the township comes in and they say, no, this is wrong, and you got to, redo it. And it's expensive mistake to make. And
that's sometimes the problem when you trust an installer. Installers are great. They know what they do really well.
Right.
But they only know what they do really well most of the time. They're not versed in the breadth of the code and necessarily don't realize that, well, there's ESFRs at the ceiling. Okay, cool. We can put in a lot of hazardous storage. But you got to stay 36 inches from the sprinkler if you're going to do that. And a lot, so there's things that having someone who understands the breadth of the things, like a fire protection engineer, they're more likely to catch things than if you have individual installers all doing their little part and hoping it all comes together at the end.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, and so I want to ask you a question too in there, because you mentioned this a couple times already. NFPA 13. So for those that don't know what NFPA 13, and to be honest, like I just became familiar with NFPA 13 recently because of an issue that came up in my day job in the warehouse. And so tell us, what is NFPA 13, and I guess for people that may not be familiar.
So NFPA, to start, is the National Fire Protection Association. They're a not-for-profit association that develops consensus-based standards for various fire protection systems that go from sprinklers to water mist to halon to clean agent, fire alarm. They also develop the National Electric Code, which is one of the few codes they actually do develop. Most of their stuff is standards.
Okay.
NFPA 13 is the standard that they have put out for the installation of water-based sprinkler systems. So it's for pre-action systems, wet pipe systems, dry pipe systems, deluge systems. Does not include water mist. That's an important distinction. It's just those four types of sprinkler systems, and it governs how to install a system. It's the building codes that tell you when you have to install one.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of, echoing to what I said before, it's important to have somebody like you or FPI Consortium, because there are all these standards and codes that, the normal people are not familiar with. It's a lot to know just to, do one project, right? So I'm curious, as we're talking about, focus on warehousing, what are some of the most, I guess, often overlooked fire safety hazards in a warehouse?
I think the most overlooked one, and it seems counterintuitive, is the impact that changing your commodity has on your fire protection in your warehouse, and what constitutes a change in commodity.
Okay.
An example my boss likes to tell is how he went into a warehouse because the owner had gotten a violation from the code official. They were told that their sprinkler system wasn't adequately designed. So my boss went in and, okay, so what's going on? Let's take a look. And they said, we don't understand. We store hose reels. We've always manufactured and stored hose reels.
Yeah.
We don't understand why this has changed. My boss looked at what they had and said to them, did you by chance used to make these out of metal? Well, yeah. When did you start making them out of plastic? They made the exact same thing, but because they changed the material they made them out of because of the increased plastic in our communities, the whole sprinkler requirements had changed drastically because metal doesn't burn. plastic does. And when plastic burns, it melts and becomes a pool fire.
Oh, yeah. I have personal experience with that, actually.
So that's a huge thing. Another thing we've seen right now that has to do with changing commodities is because of COVID-19, lots of people want hand sanitizer and is storing hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
Hand sanitizer is a class 1B flammable liquid. And if it is stored in high enough combined quantities or the packages are large enough, I think it's over 1.5 ounces. If your individual container size exceeds that, you now are storing hazardous materials and are triggering maximum allowable quantities. And if you exceed those, you're triggering secondary containment rules and additional sprinkler hazard rules and storage rules of how high and how wide. And it triggers big things. And people just don't realize that.
And now a quick break to hear from our sponsor, Supply Chain Mavens. The past year has been full of fascinating and complex supply chain news, from shortages and forecasting challenges to issues with COVID-19 test components to the never-before-seen speed to market of the vaccine. In the past year, logistics and supply chain professionals like you have been nothing short of miracle workers. Supply Chain Mavens helps your team to continuously improve by developing tailored training solutions to enhance your team's competencies so they can successfully work across all aspects of supply chain. They offer exam preparation for the coveted APICS, certified in logistics, transportation, and distribution designation, as well as education in topics across the supply chain. Visit them at supplychainmavens.net/new warehouse to learn how they can help you advance your team's performance. That's supplychainmavens.net/new warehouse. Now back to the show. Yeah, I don't think you think of it. I mean, I know I worked in a warehouse where it was cosmetics, and we had nail polish, and we were building out a new facility, and a township came and they said, "Oh, you have nail polish and acetone nail polish remover. You guys need to build a separate fireproof room." And we're like,
Yep.
"What? Like this is nail polish?" So I go, "What are you talking?" And they're like, "Yeah, you have so much volume that it's a fire hazard." So the code required that we had to build this like separate room. The room was basically like bomb-proof almost the way we built it. We had to get special light fixtures and everything. Yeah, it was pretty interesting, but yeah, it was something that I know, like they were moving a facility from New York, and it was something I guess they didn't have to deal with over there, or maybe they just got around it somehow, and
they just didn't get caught.
Yeah, and so when they were doing the new facility, it was like a shock to everybody. It was like, oh, we didn't plan for this, and the cost of this, and all this stuff. So it's pretty interesting, and I guess that's something that you guys would have kind of been able to step in and advise on. So I'm curious, a lot of the discussion that we're having and that you're talking about is revolving around the sprinkler system. So that seems to be, I'm guessing, one of the biggest things. And I know from experience from racking projects that dealing with the sprinklers and things of that nature is a heavy cost burden for a project to make sure it's accurate and done the right way. So talk to us a little bit about the sprinkler system and I guess why there's so much focus on that.
I think the reason there's so much focus on sprinklers is because they have been proven time and again to be valuable in fighting a fire. In addition, the building codes require sprinkler systems in a storage occupancy. It comes down to that. The building codes require a sprinkler system. If you're going to do something other than a sprinkler system, you have to get prior approval with an alternate means analysis. So a lot of owners, they don't want to spend the time for an alternate means that might not get approved. Yeah. Which means they're going to go back to the sprinklers. And so sprinklers are also a big thing and used to get, from an architectural standpoint, they're used to get your frontage increases to make a building bigger or area increases to make a building bigger. If you install a sprinkler system in a warehouse, you don't have to put in a fire alarm system by code. So there's a lot of benefits that come from sprinkler systems potentially. And then there is that sprinklers are proven. Generally, a sprinkler system can control a fire with as little as 4 sprinklers. In about 75% of fires, 4 sprinklers control the fire. So that's part of why we focus on them so much. There's also that sprinklers react to the heat of the fire. So they're going to go off unless someone closed a valve. When they go off and they start cooling the fire, that gives people time to evacuate.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess I've never been in a fire, thankfully. So I've never experienced the sprinklers actually going off, but
neither have I. It's okay.
Well, I would hope that because you're preventing them, right? So
we try.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and certainly there's like a lot of codes and standards and complications that go into them. We're dealing with a racking project recently, and we're trying to figure out what can we do without having to modify the sprinkler system, because we only have like so much budget. So it's interesting how to work around it and seeing the rules and different things like that. But it makes total sense, especially as you're in the racking itself. You have cardboard boxes and pallets that will go up in flames pretty quickly, I'm sure. One of the things I think that is maybe misunderstood or unclear is oftentimes companies, they may need a little extra storage, so they think that they could just throw up a couple rows of racking or something really quickly. But talk to us a little bit about, if somebody's thinking about doing that, what should they initially check out from like a fire safety code standpoint?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
So if someone's struggling for space and they're thinking they can just throw up a couple rows of rack, the first thing I'd say is generally that requires a building permit. Right. So if you have a racking installer who says, we can just install this, no one's going to notice, it's no big deal. That may be true. No one may notice. But when you sell the warehouse, the person you sell it to who wants to put in more racking maybe, or if you ever decide you want to rack out your whole warehouse and now someone does go pull a permit, they may come and go, when did that part go in? That wasn't there previously. We never approved that. Yeah. Next would be have someone who knows your sprinkler system tell you what the system is capable of. Know what K factor your sprinkler is. Know what the temperature rating is. Because if you know those two things, you can pull 13 and be able to say, okay, we can store to this height. If you want the easiest chance of storing, keep your ordinary combustibles under 12 feet and keep your plastics under 5.
Interesting, yeah. Yeah, because I was even thinking, like, some places, they'll just do it in-house with, like, their facilities team and not get an installer, right? So I think that's something to avoid because, like, as you mentioned, you go down the line and it becomes an issue later and it becomes more costly at that point. I mean, I know of one project, I had a friend who was involved, and he was telling me, like, it was a new building and they had put up racking, but they hadn't gotten approval to fill their racking yet. And they were like, loading all this stuff from new inventory and stuff, and they were like running out of space. So they were like, well, what's the worst could happen? Like, let's fill the racking. And sure enough, the township came in and they found something wrong and they had to unload all the racking, and it just was a nightmare for them. I mean, I'm happy I wasn't a part of it, but
Well, the worst that can happen if you didn't get a permit, it sounds like they at least had gotten a permit and just didn't have their C of O yet. If you don't get a permit and people aren't reviewing it, then if there were a fire, now the fire department's walking into something that, as far as they know, isn't there.
Right.
And so what happens when they walk in and suddenly there's a fire in this rack that's 20 feet tall that they weren't expecting to see? They don't have the correct equipment to respond to necessarily.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of instances, they may walk back out and say, we're just going to let this burn. We'll protect the outside. We'll just make sure the building doesn't fall.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah.
And people don't like to think of what the worst case. You don't want to think about the fire happening in your facility. But it's really for everyone's safety, unfortunately, to say it's for everyone's safety to go pull the building permits because it helps protect the fire department when they respond. It's making sure that you actually caught everything. I didn't used to be a big understander of the whole government interference in buildings and things like that. And I know sometimes it causes a lot of delays or heartache because people feel like, why can't I just do this? It's my property. Why can't I do it? And it's because your property doesn't only affect you.
Right.
Your property affects the fire department. And if there's a fire, it affects the whole environment because anything that the fire department sprays the water on, it's going to go down the sewer.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't think of all the different factors there. I mean, and it's a good point too, about how it affects everybody else. And like you said, it's frustrating at some point, especially in warehousing and distribution, because everything is so fast paced. Everybody wants to get everything done right away. But, I mean, it's necessary as you mentioned there. And, it's really important to protect, not only, I guess, your workers internally, but externally as well. When you bring up, the water going into the sewer. I mean, I never even thought about that, but it's a great point. So with that being said, we're talking about the racking and things of that nature, but, a lot of things are happening in the warehousing space in terms of automation and robotics and, getting like more narrow aisle, and we're getting ASRS systems. So how are fire codes changing, and are fire codes keeping up with the changes in technologies? And do they need to change, I guess maybe is the initial question, with these new systems and things in place?
No, the fire codes aren't keeping up, and by design they can't keep up, at least not in the US. Fire codes and the building codes are on 3-year cycles. So the 2021 edition of the IBC and IFC was just issued last fall, and they're already starting the comment review cycle for the 2024 edition. But that means that any changes that are proposed this year in 2021, based on the changes in how storage is done or new technologies or things like that, they aren't going to even dream of being incorporated until 2024. And then even when they're incorporating the codes are just model codes. They're not enforceable until the local code officials, the state, the municipality, who have you, adopts them. And those people are generally at least a couple years behind. So we're in 2021 right now. A lot of the municipalities that we work with are only working with the 2015 edition of the IBC and IFC. Some are actually using the 2018, thankfully. And then the standards that they incorporate by reference, 72, 13, these various things that govern how you install sprinklers or how you install fire alarm systems, they're also in a 3-year cycle, and their cycle is 1 year after. So if there's a 2015 IBC, the NFPA 13 isn't adopted until 2016. So the 2015 IBC incorporates the 2013 by reference. So you end up multiple years behind by the time municipalities manage to adopt these codes. And unless they are making changes in their adoption to address these new systems, unfortunately, the codes are just silent. And it's because of the consensus that, unfortunately, that's where FM Global or insurance companies like that come in. Mm-hmm. They don't operate under a consensus standard. FM Global is its own thing. They're allowed to say, these are our standards to get insured. This is what you will do. We perform the fire tests. We feel that this is what's safe. This is what we're willing to insure. You will do this, or we're going to charge you a whole lot more because the risk of you catching on fire is higher.
Interesting. Yeah. So would you say that we're potentially sitting on like a fire code bubble almost? Are people going to be implementing like these new technologies, and a couple of years down the road, they're going to get hit with like they have to make some changes because it's not conforming to code?
A lot of things aren't done retroactively.
Okay. A
lot of things in the building codes and the fire codes aren't retroactive. You review them to code of record. Mm-hmm. Now, where it would come into play is, say you put in an ASR system now and you have a performance-based design. You say, this is how we're going to design it, and we're happy. Mm-hmm. And in 10 years, say 13 now has come up with design criteria, and they've said, this is how we want to protect this. And so you go to build an expansion on your ASR system, and you try and put in the same thing you put in the first time. The code officials might go, no, we want you to use what our endorsed standard says now.
Oh boy.
And but it's all discussion with code officials. It's negotiation. That's where having the licensed FPE who understands the history of your building and the history of what you're doing comes into play. The other problem with some of these ASRS systems is they've performed fire tests that say, many of them have performed fire tests that say that their system can be protected, and here's the sprinkler system to use. The problem is a lot of those fire tests are done proprietarily. They are not publicly available information. And unless the manufacturers or the clients who funded the test are willing to let that information be released to NFPA 13, the committee shoots in the dark trying to figure out how to protect it because they have no fire test. They have no data to base their design on. What they have is someone coming in saying, we swear this works.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept. I didn't realize how, lagging really the codes are to stay up with, what's really happening out there. So, I mean, it's really interesting insight in it. I'm learning a lot here from you because, I'm just a warehouse manager guy, and I touch it every once in a while here and, projects and stuff when it comes up. And obviously, the day-to-day fire safety, like don't block the fire extinguisher and things like that.
Hey, that's good too.
Yeah, that's a start, right?
It's a good start. Don't like when I walk into a warehouse and see the fire doors blocked. Yes. That's a problem.
Yeah. Keep the egress clear, right? So really, really interesting stuff. And, definitely, I'm sure there's so much more to unpack, but I'm happy you could come on and give us kind of an overview of fire protection and the codes, and give us some understanding on what NFPA is, and even the future of codes as well, as technology keeps continuing to grow. And it's really easy, to see the importance of getting someone involved who knows this stuff like you guys. So Sarah, I really appreciate you coming on the show. How can people find out more information about the FPI Consortium?
So there's a couple ways. You can reach out to me, certainly. My email address is sarah@the-FPI, that's Foxtrot Papa India.com. Our website is www.the-fpi.com. My boss has a number of blog posts that he updates semi-regularly. His most recent one was on some changes that are coming to NFPA 13 that are really going to have an impact on flow-through rack and pushback rack.
Okay.
That's the change that's coming is really going to be a problem when it starts getting endorsed. So we'll see how that goes. The code isn't accepted yet. It still has to get through the technical committee meeting this summer, but it could cause some challenges for the industry. And we also are on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Okay, great. Yeah, and when those code changes happen, maybe we'll have to get you back on the show so we can talk about it and let the audience know what's going on. So we'll definitely put all those links on the newwarehouse.com as well for reference. So, Sarah, I want to thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for coming on the show.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.